let's come back to Treegate. Now, if for some reason you are unfamiliar with Treegate, we'll quickly summarize everything that happened on Sunday in the third round of the Hero Dubai Desert Classic. Patrick Reed's teeing off on the 17th hole. It's a short par 4. It's reachable with driver. Some players with 3 wood. It kind of has a manufactured dog leg created by a cluster of 3 palm trees that are together in kind of this corner that are meant to kind of be the obstacle you have to get around to get to the green. Patrick Reed hits a tee shot, goes square into a tree in one of the 3 in the cluster. And it turns out that the TV cameras had a very clear shot of the ball going into one of the trees, and Patrick Reed winds up looking in one of the wrong trees, one of the other 2 trees. They're actually closer to the hole, and he was kind of pointed in that direction, as were DP World Tour rules officials by marshals and spotters on the ground right around the tree, who said, hey, I went into the tree they wound up looking in. And over the course of that investigation for the golf ball, under the rules of golf, you have to be able to positively identify your golf balls as yours to be granted the opportunity to have an unplayable lie, take a 1-stroke penalty, and take relief from the ball dropped straight under the tree where you found the spot where you found in the tree to the ground, take a couple of club lengths. So Reed winds up saying he's describing the marking, sort of, although if you kind of listen to the actual footage of it on the DP World Tour broadcast, it doesn't really sound like he gives a whole lot of in-depth description of the golf ball. He says, it's Titleist, it's got a marking on it, it's got the black arrow on it. Oh, and he says, I see the black arrow when he's looking at it with binoculars up in the tree. Mind you, the wrong tree. And he winds up satisfying whatever requirements the DP World Tour officials thought they needed to satisfy to give him this unplayable lie grant. So they let him take unplayable lie, makes a bogey, goes on to lose the tournament by a shot to Rory McIlroy. And obviously a lot of people recognize that Reed went looking up the wrong tree, didn't identify the ball that was his. And if you look at pictures of the ball that he wound up playing versus the way that he kind of marks his regular ball, his regular Titleist Pro V1, you don't see this black line over the kind of arrow area, the putting alignment portion of the ball. Titleist puts that on there. They put a black arrow on there, 2 arrows, but the ball that he found wound up playing with had a black line, looks like over that portion of the ball. And some people do that. That's common, happens a lot. But it's not an arrow. It's a little different from the Titleist marking. Anyhow, obviously a lot of people who are watching that were upset. Patrick Reed has a history of rules issues, rules infractions, rules problems. But technically under the rules of golf, he's in the right here, because if you got a bad ruling from an official, whether they didn't do their diligence properly to test him to know if it was his ball, or they gave him the wrong ruling or whatever, under the rules of golf, you can't be penalized for that. You had the official, they gave you the ruling, it's settled and done. So, at the bottom line, Reed is in the clear here. He's not going to be disqualified. He's not going to have the $1 million that he won for finishing in second taken away from him. None of that is happening. So, you got to put that to the side for a second. However, Reed was still getting a whole lot of heat for what he said, or what he did, and then what he said after the fact, saying, he would absolutely go back to the tee. There was no way that he would have taken this drop if it definitely wasn't his ball. Well, not so much. But then after the fact, a couple days later, we finished on a Monday. Yesterday, we got a comment from him written seemingly through a text message thread, then screenshotted and put on his different social media services. If you're one of the few that hasn't blocked, you could see it. Beauty of people having other accounts. I don't have a burner account, but found it through someone else's account. Means you can still read it. So despite being blocked by Patrick Reed, and that took an awfully long time to happen, by the way. Here's what he had to say in, sounds like Apple iMessage, but hey, whatever. It doesn't matter how you communicate it. Here's what he says. Quote, some people love controversy, but what happened on the 17th hole at the Hero Dubai Desert Classic was a non-issue. As the DP World Tour confirmed, I was not asked to identify the tree my ball struck. That was done by the ShotLink volunteers and marshals. I was asked to describe the distinctive markings on the ball I was playing. I am looking forward to this week's Asian Tour flagship event at Royal Greens, end quote. And that's the Saudi International, by the way. I don't know if you know the name of the tournament, but it's the Saudi International, Saudi Arabia this week for an effective live event, but it's really an Asian Tour event. So he says that, puts that out there, and of course, the natural response from someone who can read through all of this, and no pun intended, is that he absolves himself of any blame here, because he kind of neglects to talk about the part where he says, I see the black arrow. Well, that's not really a distinctive marking on the ball of a Pro V1. they're on every one of them now. So if you're playing with one made in the last, 4 or 5 years since they started doing this version of the marking, then yeah, it's going to be on there, and you can describe that. But what would have been more distinctive, again, if you look at kind of the history of how Reed marks his ball, and I spent way too much time on Getty Images doing this the other day because it was longer than 1 minute. He marks his ball with a red dot to the right, I believe, of the number on the Titleist Pro V1. And so that's the marking you're really looking for, is a dot. And whether he does it on both sides, I don't know. But if you look at the other images that are available of his ball that he played during the Dubai Desert Classic, it doesn't look like he has this kind of big, wide black line that would go over the marking arrow, the alignment arrow, or anything like that. You don't see that. I'm not saying it's not on there. I just don't see it. The shots are not good enough to know one way or the other whether it's absolutely on there or absolutely not on there. So Reed described his marking, which was the black arrow, but he didn't mean the black line, I don't think. He meant the black arrow. So there's your point of kind of differentiation, and where he tries to absolve himself here, saying, well, I didn't decide the tree we were going to look up, and I just described my ball to them, and they were totally fine with it. So I got off on a tree. Don't be mad at me. And this is a very Reed thing to do, where technically in the right. I'm going to give him that. He's technically in the right about all of those things, but he finds a way to blame someone else for the stuff that he did that contributed to a problem, particularly a rule situation. And this is one of those things where he's a contributing factor to it, because he did technically say his markings, but he said, I could see the black arrow. Well, again, he wasn't technically lying. Maybe he did, but that didn't necessarily mean it was his ball. And so the rules of golf kind of come into question here. Obviously, the effort of the DP World Tour officials come into question here because Reed's questioning them in the first place. Totally understandable that a marshal or volunteer, because, again, they're volunteers and they're not necessarily always young people with good eyes. They may have pointed him and the officials in the wrong direction, pointed them to the wrong tree. And so, on one hand, you're like, yeah, I get it, because you got bad information potentially, and so you decided to maybe make the best of that. I don't know. And I don't know if there's malice or if it's just, hey, this is what I think I see. And you can't ascribe that to him because you don't know his heart, I guess. But there is some, obviously, responsibility on Reed here, because he said he positively identified a ball that definitely wasn't his. So he's trying to say, well, it wasn't my fault. They told me it was in this tree. I looked up there and described the ball, and there it was. I got a free relief, or got an unplayable lie there with 1-stroke penalty. So that's kind of the end of that from the technical description standpoint, and Reed once again issues a statement that more or less tries to clear himself of any wrongdoing, even though he kind of is implicated by saying he found his ball and that definitely wasn't his. So then you throw in the comments of one Mike Lorenzo Vera, and if you are not a DP World Tour regular, I understand if you're scratching your head wondering who Mike Lorenzo Vera is. But he is a Frenchman who has played some great golf on the DP World Tour over the years, kind of down on his luck these days, but still a very good player, one of the, class player in the world. And he tweeted last night, I guess yesterday, on the evening of the 31st, so 9 p.m. last night, he tweeted, I just don't understand how players stay silent after being robbed one spot, I think he meant shot, by someone that cheated. Fantastic golf player, but Reed effing cheated. How can you identify 100% something very specific on your ball that is not in the tree? How is that guy not DQ'd? And then obviously a lot of people responded in the affirmative, because Mike Lorenzo Vera is right. That last part is the key part of the criticism of what Reed had to say and what he did. How can you say you've identified a very specific portion of your ball when it's not in that tree? And I think Reed's response would have been, well, I just described the Pro V1. And that's all I did. And the officials were cool with that, which then went to the officials. So we have this big old loop, and I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of silence here from some of the players on the DP World Tour that are regulars. That might be a Liv thing, that might be a Reed thing, that might just be a, hey, they're getting screwed thing. But that comes into play here. But at the end of the day, you are limited by two things. One, your honesty, and two, the officials helping you out. And three, I guess, the rules of golf. And Reed knows the rules of golf. He knows how to use them to his advantage, and he has figured out a way how to explain things to people in a way that's just gray enough that it could pass muster, even though the spirit of it might not be true. So that's kind of the end of that. I hope that we are just kind of putting this in our back pocket for another day where this could happen. Hopefully it doesn't happen again, but, you know, things tend to have a history of repeating themselves in history, and hopefully that's just... It would be nice to go more than a year between one of these things, but I'm sure we'll have another one really soon. So